Let's bring in General Mark Kimmitt. He is the former Assistant Secretary of State for Political Military Affairs, serving under former President George W. Bush. Good morning, General. Thanks for joining us.
Good morning, Mitch.
Now, today marks 6 months since Russia's invasion of Ukraine. Thousands of lives have been lost. Millions have been forced to leave their homes as a result of the fighting. Is there going to be an end to this war anytime soon?
Well, my view is there will not be. In fact, the United States is probably going to announce today a new arms package, but a package that will involve bringing in equipment that needs still to be produced. So the United States is looking a couple of years out at this point to deliver those weapon systems. So it tells me that even the United States thinks that this is going to be a long war, and there's no significant breakthrough that we anticipate anytime in the near future.
Now, do you expect an escalation here, given this car bombing that the Russians are blaming on the Ukrainians?
I don't know. I think that's a very good question. Nobody seems to really know what's going on here. So I think we're just going to have to wait and see. Certainly the Russians blame it on the Ukrainians. Of course, they blame bad weather on the Ukrainians now. But whether they actually take action directly related to the killing of Duganov, that's yet to be seen.
Well, what would escalation mean for this conflict? If there were escalation, what would that look like on the Russian side? And I'm guessing the Ukrainians wouldn't be the ones to escalate.
Well, it could actually be that the West decides to assist President Zelensky to what you would say escalate the war. Because right now it's in somewhat of a stalemate, it could well be that the United States decides to lift some of its restrictions that it has put on the Ukrainian use of weapons so far. Perhaps F-16s, a no-fly zone, allowing attacks into Russia proper, the use of ATACMS missiles. It could very well be that because both sides are running low on high-tech equipment, that the United States and its NATO allies decides to allow Ukraine a more aggressive approach, and in order to do that, give them much more advanced weapons.
Well, the implementation of a no-fly zone would mean that either the Ukrainian government with American planes or the American government or NATO would have to be willing to shoot down Russian planes. And have we reached an escalation of that part where that is in play?
No, I don't think we have, which is why I don't believe there will be an escalation by either side. Unfortunately, I believe that we're going to have this long, bloody stalemate for quite some time unless there is some sort of breakthrough on the ground. And at this point, I can't see it happening unless there is a substantial difference in what the military experts call the correlation of forces.
If you had the chance to brief the president, the current president, as you briefed the former president, but if you had the chance to brief the current president on the situation, what would you be telling him?
What I'd be telling him, unfortunately, and it will sound defeatist, but I think it's time for us to make it very clear to President Zelensky that he needs to get to diplomacy rather than military support. All that's happening at this point is we're drawing down on our own stocks, our own military stocks, and we may get to the point where it becomes a national security threat to us if we send them more javelins, if we send them more HIMARS, if we send them more artillery and rockets. So I think it may be time to tell him that although he may see it as a defeatist stance, that it's time for him to get to the negotiating table, because there's a little chance that he will win, and there's a little chance that Russia will win. So do we want this to go on as status quo for the next 4 years, or do we want to get to a diplomatic solution?
But you don't think he's tried that, President Zelensky, that he has tried to negotiate and say, stop this war?
Not to the extent, in my view, he needs to. He continues to say he wants to take back all of Ukraine and Crimea. Those are maximalist demands that there's very little chance that either he will achieve or we will support. So I really appreciate everything that Zelensky has done as a leader, keeping his country together, keeping the international community behind him. But there has to come a point where he accepts the reality on the ground, and the reality on the ground is that there's little chance that he will ever take back the Donbass or the Crimea. So we need to come to some sort of Minsk II agreement or Minsk III agreement that hardens the lines where they are, because both Russians and the Ukrainians could fight this for years without a significant change on the ground. I hope I'm wrong, but that's what it looks like to me today.
Well, before we go, this nuclear plant that is kind of in the line of fire here, shouldn't there be some sort of a demilitarized zone around this thing? It just seems like both sides would be well served to keep away from it and to keep us all from going into some sort of nuclear holocaust.
No, I think that's exactly right. Both sides need to recognize this as a mutual suicide pact. If anything was to happen to that nuclear plant, it would affect both Russia and Ukraine. But Russia continues to use this as a place of sanctuary and safe harbor for a lot of their equipment, knowing that the Ukrainians will not fire on it. It's much like, as we saw in Iraq, where the enemy often used mosques as a place to store their weapons because they know the other side won't directly attack the mosque. And in this case, the Ukrainians won't directly attack the nuclear facility. But again, this is an example where both sides need to calm down and need to recognize that there's no good that comes out of continuing to have a militarized nuclear facility that's inside the line of fire.
That is General Mark Kimmitt. He is the former Assistant Secretary of State for Political Military Affairs, serving under former President George W. Bush. General Kimmitt, thanks for joining us this morning.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Thanks for watching. Go to newsnationnow.com to find NewsNation in your cable lineup. And don't forget to click the red subscribe button below to get more of NewsNation's fact-based, unbiased coverage.